Hello there, friends. Andrea with the Hobbit costume here. And you guessed it, today's conversation all centers around the wonderful world of Middle-earth. My guest today is Reno Lauro, and I actually first heard him speak over on the Amon Sul podcast with Richard Rohlin. And I wasn't fully satisfied with their conversation. There were things and questions I had, and I wrote Reno, and he was kind enough to appear on my podcast to continue that conversation. The main topic surrounding this discussion is Tolkien's reaction to a mechanized world, a world of machines, with his lore, writings, and story being a response to this world. I've been thinking a lot lately over the past few years about how to be in the world. And this discussion was very meaningful and really hit right on the topics I've been exploring. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing your response and what you think about it, because it's not just people who like Lord of the Rings that will enjoy this conversation. It's about things that are much deeper level than that. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Reno. Hi, Reno. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. Thank
you so much. But how do you say your last name?
Lauro is
Lauro.
How you say it. Okay. It's from Naples. It's actually a family name from my father's from the island of Ischia, which is the ancient Greek island of Pithecusus.
Okay, so that really is appropriate for you to be in those Orthodox circles then.
Yeah,
an ancient space.
Yeah, that's the thing is being kind of in an ancient space. It also helps that I really love the story that, and you didn't even ask anything, but I'm just going to tell the story just to get started. Tolkien, when he went to Europe with his daughter, I think this might have been the 1960s, early 1960s. He didn't want to go to Rome. There was two places that he wanted to see: Assisi.
Okay. As in Francis of?
St. Francis of.
Okay.
And Venice, which was part of the Venetian Empire, was part of the Byzantine trading network. And in many ways, Venice was a Byzantine city. And so there's some connection there, I think, something interesting about the inner workings of Tolkien and that. So
I wonder, now I'm curious. So why not Rome, and why was he leaning towards the Byzantine Empire versus, say, the Roman Empire? Although the Byzantines did consider themselves the Roman Empire. I just learned that on a podcast.
That's exactly right. They never stopped thinking of themselves as Rome, and the Roman Empire really didn't stop until the mid 15th century. That's a huge question.
Shoot. Well, we have another whole... This wasn't the reason for this podcast.
This is the next episode. We're just setting it up from the start. Okay. There's a couple of reasons, but let's just say two things that we know for certain, or three things. One, Tolkien was quite bothered by the changes, Vatican II changes.
Oh, right.
So famously,
he liked that Latin mass. That bugged him, right? Okay.
Right. And I mean, in not politicizing in any way, but I think he felt that there was an ancientness that was being cut off from, and it was symbolic of the modes of progress creeping into the ancient church. I think that's his suspicion. So that bothered him. He was friends with Father Gervais Matthews, who would off and on attend Inkling's meetings. He was a priest, but also one of the foremost scholars of Byzantine history.
I see. Okay.
So teaching there at Oxford. And so Tolkien must have had some connection and conversations about Byzantium, the medieval aesthetics of light with Gervais. This is something that I'm writing about right now. And three.
There's a number 3?
Yeah, the siege of Gondor may or may not have been. We may or may not see echoes of the siege of Byzantium, of Constantinople.
Interesting. Okay.
We'll
for those of you who are still here.
I'm
sorry. This
Oh,
is a
no.
Tolkien
Yeah.
themed episode. So
Right.
actually, I have a feeling I want to do more Tolkien episodes because I'm really into it right now. So okay, there's enough fans. Don't worry, there's enough Tolkien crossover of the Amon Sul. I'm hoping after this episode
Right.
that we will be able to do more. So there's a bit of a lead up to why I ended up asking you to come on my show today. So first of all, I do these little videos where I do like less than 10-minute monologues making sense of certain things that are happening that are on my mind. And so I did one regarding the Ukraine crisis, war, invasion, all of that. And it was more about looking at Tolkien in times of crisis. That's so even though that was the technical reason I was making the video, it was like representative of, in general, times of crisis, difficult things, harsh realities. This one particular bit that Gandalf was talking to, and it's in the Two Towers when he's Gandalf the White, he's newly Gandalf the White, and he's talking about Sauron. Nope, not the right name. Sauron being a wise fool. And I just, that kind of struck a chord with me. So I made a little video about it. But then, again, I had lots of positive comments, but the one, I wrote it to you already. You know this one.
That's right.
There was one where, the guy was just angsty, which is fine. But he's like, did Gandalf... what are Gandalf's thoughts on the invasion of Afghanistan and or Iraq, and so that's getting like, he's taking it literally, and so I'm like, okay, this is something I almost wanted to make another video about it, but I didn't know how to answer it. And then I heard you on the Amon Sul / Christ and Tolkien podcast.
Okay.
And you guys were talking about you and Richard Rohlin, friend of the show, were speaking about on fairy stories, but particularly your thesis that is it your doctoral thesis?
It is.
Yeah.
It was.
About this situation of hyperrealities. I'm paraphrasing your thesis. I'm just going to write it down somewhere. You have it written down somewhere so you can quote it, right?
Yeah,
it's very convoluted.
And it's beyond the colonization of human imagining, crafting mythopoeic life worlds as a response to hyperreality.
Okay.
That was the dissertation title. It's very dissertation-y, and it's in some ways, I mean, it's admittedly obnoxious, but it was
that's
accurate
what it is.
and precise.
It is what it is.
And that's what a dissertation title is: accurate and precise. So.
Okay, so that, and again, that's one of the reasons why I felt confident in writing you, because I understood what it said. When I had to rewind a few times. Right. But it clicked. So I was like, oh, that's why. But again, that needs unpacking. So that's what we are here today for. It's a little bit of unpacking as to, I mean, I've heard it said, like, even I remember I took like children's literature in university. So, it that was said back then, like in the intro level classes, they say like, oh yes, so people like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, like their work is more than real. It's hyper real. It's something that you can go to. But it's okay. But and I can say, oh, so it's good to go to those things in in good and bad, but particularly in difficult times, considering Tolkien started writing his okay, I don't know the exact but I know he started writing the legendary. I know he started like writing on little leaflets in the trenches in World War I.
That's right.
So so that's why I don't know why that's true. I don't know why. So that's what you're here for. Is why do we in times of crises particularly, why do we look to these epic stories, these that speak to our depths? Why do we look there? When it's like, well, that's not real, Right. Gandalf and Iraq, no, that didn't happen.
So this is it's a deliciously big question.
Okay.
That's going to take we might not be able to unpack it all, but what we should do is start to unpack the kind of unpack the coffee maker, so to speak, right?
Okay.
So that we can make sure that at the very least we've got coffee and toast for breakfast.
Okay. I'm not looking for a fancy feast here. I'm just looking.
No, and I don't, and the only reason why I say that is because we want to make sure that we do due diligence to this.
Right.
But yes, as you kind of have suspected, right, there's lots of kind of intersections that are happening with this question.
Okay.
And unfortunately, especially since the great success of Jackson's films, which, we've talked about this. I mean, they're wonderful in their own ways. we can talk about that too. I've got specific critiques about it and thoughts about the way that it could have been or should have been and the reasons why. But
no, we'll wait until the Amazon I legit will.
Let's do that.
Be asking you again.
Or Rings on
and we'll
Prime.
do the what could have been, should have been for Jackson's films, along with the when the Amazon series is completely out.
Yes.
That would be my pleasure. If that's okay.
Yes. No, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
But since the release, right, we have this incredible explosion of Tolkien fandom.
Okay.
And that kind of it's wonderful, right? Like Tolkien wanted people to read and enjoy. Now the question is, when it comes to fandom is a little different than, let's say, the way people read Dante when Dante's works came out, right?
Sorry to
please.
So in answering so I kind of distilled my question. So why is this a helpful way of facing reality? Why is Tolkien's story a helpful way of facing reality? Is the Jackson films, does that make it almost a different question? I'm really more asking, even though that's how I started getting actually more interested in Tolkien, but why is this, as in the books, why are the books helpful? That story, or is that can it not be divorced from the movies?
That's a great question.
Let's start from unpacking. What are we talking about here?
That's right. It makes it harder to answer the question because of Jackson's films and fandom.
Okay.
Let's just say that, right? It makes it harder to answer that question because there's other elements mixed into it that Tolkien knew about, but most certainly didn't anticipate the enormity of. Tolkien, obviously, famously, The Lord of the Rings is written in the midst of World War II.
Yeah.
Right? As a matter of fact, in 1944, I was just reading about this the other night, but in 1944, it's December of 1944. It's the last winter of the war. It might be No, it's December of 1944. And he's riding. There's a huge snowstorm. Tolkien is really grumpy. He's fallen off his bike 3 times, going back and forth from school.
Literally? He's literally fallen?
Literally fell off his bike 3 times. I know. And he was it was an obnoxious day. And in the letter, he's writing to his son, Christopher, who at the time was stationed in South Africa.
Okay.
And he says, well, it appears that this war is coming to a close. And essentially says the only victor of the war is the machines.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay.
What will their next move be? He says.
It sounds like he's talking in the Matrix right now.
Well, here's the thing. Yes, but no.
Okay.
Right? There is a definite, he was sensing that there is a shift in the mood of civilization itself. But Tolkien, it wasn't anything new to him, right? I mean, Beowulf is written in the midst of existential hardship and suffering.
Wait. I didn't know this. What?
Yeah, well,
okay, normie audience. So Beowulf is written in the midst of an existential
hardship and suffering.
Crisis? Okay.
Right? The world itself was it was a tough world to be in.
Well, remind me of the
Beowulf is probably written around the
700. Okay.
Well, it's older than the 700s, but probably captured around the 700s.
Okay.
But the literature that Tolkien is reading and used to is in the midst of suffering, and was used precisely for the way that you are talking about the Lord of the Rings and the legendarium being used
Okay.
to make sense of the outside world, used to make sense of how do we speak into suffering, not just as like a consolation, right? But as Tolkien famously said, an escape, right? Now,
Is this in the? There's a quote I have here that I thought would be helpful. I have it up here. Okay, so I'm
exactly.
gonna may I, if you don't mind,
Please, it's
do you mind if
beautiful.
I read it? So, why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? Or if when he cannot do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls. The world outside has not become less real because the prisoner cannot see it. In using escape in this way, the critics have chosen the wrong word. And, what is more, they are confusing, not always by sincere error, the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. Just so a party spokesman might have labeled departure from the misery of the Führers or any other Reich, and even criticism of it as treachery. Not only do they confound the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter, but they would seem to prefer the acquiescence of the Quisling to the resistance of the patriot. So we even see a little bit of the Second World War brought in there.
That's
So,
exactly right.
so that I read that just now. So I'm looking to you to deconstruct it for us, please.
Yeah, so just kind of a super simple annotation, right? What's interesting here is that Quisling was a collaborator with the Nazis in Norway.
Okay. Okay.
Right? So he's talking about quite literally a traitor to people. So Quisling collaborating and fleeing, right? It's a different, and here's kind of like he's playing with the words of just kind of escape. But here, so what he's saying is that when we are talking about escape in the sense of fairy story, and let's just use Beowulf as a solid example, rather than contemporary, Robert Jordan or something like that. Let's use a solid example of Beowulf. The escape that he's talking about is an escape into a more real world, right? Because certainly being inside of a prison is a truncated, it's a diminished existence, right? And when you escape from there, you're escaping into all the fullness and goodliness of life, right?
Right.
There's also
Goodliness is a good word.
the goodliness, right? There's also a little allusion here to kind of Plato's famous cave allegory. It's in the book of it's
Okay. I see it
public,
now, but I didn't see it before. But obviously,
right?
okay, of course, yeah.
Now, we don't want to get too far because one, that's a little unnecessarily academic, but we can make a simple analogy that, look, it's the same kind of thing, like moving away from a world of shadows and illusion and moving into a more full and rich understanding of the world itself, right? Now, here again, letter to Christopher Tolkien, here in On Fairy Stories, presented about 38, 39, just as in the midst of kind of struggling with writing the sequel to The Hobbit, okay? He's working through these ideas, right? He didn't want to write the sequel to The Hobbit. As a matter of fact, what he wanted to do was, he wrote his publisher and said, why can't we just go ahead and publish the Silmarillion? That's what he wanted to publish.
No.
And they're like, no, people
no.
like the hobbits and they're cute and just more cute hobbits. Okay.
So as someone who's in the
After-
midst of reading the Silmarillion, like with my book club, we're discussing it, and some are like, I can't. Some are like, I love Lord of the Rings, but I can't. Like others are like, I love it, but I feel like we're were not quite as numerous as those who
No,
like
I
Lord of the
dig.
Rings.
Hey, you know what might be helpful there, and I've told my students this too, is reading Hesiod's Theogony and Works and Days. It's a super short piece, but it
Okay.
was part of the kind of like ancient Greek world. But it functions in many of the same ways. Like,
Right.
and so, anyways, that's what Tolkien's up to in the Silmarillion,
Okay,
right?
okay, yeah. But anyway,
History and
so his
cosmology.
right. So but yeah, history and cosmology, but
Yeah.
typically people don't flock to that. So yes, the story and a narrative is typically what they
Yeah.
appreciate. So he moved on to Lord of the Rings then?
No, he didn't move on to it, but he's like, okay, if you're gonna want a sequel to The Hobbit, how do we do this? And it's
Right.
after he delivered the On Fairy Stories lecture at
Mm-hmm.
the University of St. Andrews, my
Right.
alma mater. He suddenly realized, oh, wait a second, this isn't a sequel to The Hobbit. This is part of the stories of the Silmarillion itself.
Right.
The Hobbit was never really intended to be part of anything.
Right.
What
He
the
just
Lord of
borrowed
the Rings
names, right?
did,
Mm-hmm.
because they asked for a sequel, but what he did is he dragged the Hobbit into the Silmarillion.
Right. Yeah.
So when people say I don't like the Silmarillion, let's cut to the cool stuff. It's like, okay, well, like the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit are part of the Silmarillion. The thing is that it's a history of the
Right.
people of Middle Earth, of the
Right.
elves and human beings, right? Okay, we digressed too
We're
much.
yeah,
Into
so
it.
so yeah, we
Let
got a
me
little bit of information there.
monologue.
So now we're going back to no, that's
Yeah,
okay. You got me monologuing again.
that's exactly right.
So so back to the On Fairy Stories quote that I gave,
Yes.
and about the
Okay.
idea of these things being more real, a little bit the platonic sense of things being like, is it like in like patterns of reality? Like, I'm gonna borrow from Jonathan Pajot. It's the patterns that are distilled so that we can reach at those. Is that part of
I
part
think,
of it all?
yeah, without kind of needing to adopt that language, whilst like I think it's very helpful and useful. Yes is the answer. To more clearly see and anticipate and connect to the deep things of reality, right?
Okay.
But that doesn't really kind of answer the question about like the escape part into the real and his letter to his son Christopher,
Okay.
right? Because um, along with that letter to his son Christopher, he's also writing just the month before, writing the portion when Sam and Frodo are approaching Mount Doom, and
Mm.
Sam says, "Don't the great stories never end?" Right? And he's like, hey, and talking about a Rendil, and then he says, "Oh, why, Mr. Frodo, you've got some of that light in that glass that the lady gave you,
Yeah.
right? We're a part of that story too, I
Yeah.
suppose." Um, and so when he's writing his son, he realizes that World War II is also a part of this great story,
Oh.
right? Yes, exactly. That
Well,
it's
even with
not,
World War One
yeah,
and World War Two, like being connected. But you mean even in the stories
even
of
that
old,
moment.
connecting through
Even in
all of
that
it?
moment, right? And so what's true and real about the Lord of the Rings continues to be true and real in the great evils that we confront in the here and now.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, why do I want to sort of weep right now?
totally, absolutely. It's
Like it connect,
glorious.
like when you say when you connect it,
Mm,
when you like
yeah,
no, and Sam does, and that was why like, oh, we love Sam, we
I
love
know.
Sam so much. When he says in his sweet, like, this is again why childlike manner, almost
Yeah.
simple
Hmm.
man of the people, when he connects this, he says something so above, like
Hmm.
so deep that connects,
Yeah.
so high above and below, I guess it connects to
Hmm.
the depths and the heart of it all. And when you articulate it, it's like, oh, that's true, Sam.
I know.
We're all in the great stories.
We're all in the great stories. It's even more heartbreaking, Frodo's response, because he says, I suppose that our story will end later or sooner,
Yeah.
realizing that their moment in the story it's not given how long we last. Like,
Right.
we don't need to last to the end of the story. We could be, to use a Star Trek analogy, like red-shirted immediately, right? And
Wait. Oh, yeah, that took me a
that's right.
moment. Sorry, right. Sorry, to all those non-Trekkies out there.
That's right.
It's the unnamed crewman.
Uh-huh.
That's what that is? Am
In the
I
old
correct in
series,
my
that's right. And they
summation?
usually
here?
wore red shirts,
Okay.
and they died like 3 seconds
Within
into
5 seconds. Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
Well, 5 if you're, really giving
Yeah.
extra screen time. Yeah, yeah.
right? But what matters is what we do with the time given to us.
Right. Oh, okay. Like, hello, Quoty McQuarterson. Thank you.
Now we're
Yes.
like bringing it all together
It
here,
is.
right?
It is. No, it is. And because, okay, I am going to actually go back to my notes because I feel like it's just getting.
It's getting out of hand.
I'm getting like too like, oh, concepts and so, but I actually thought it would be helpful to go over to connect all of this, to go into the definitions of a few of the words in your dissertation title.
Okay, that's
so
great.
What does mythopoeic mean? Because at first I thought, because again, when I was like, it was what is it, like I was taking the dictation of this and writing it down as I was emailing you asking you to come on my show. So my autocorrect thought it was mythopoetic, but it's not. It's I went back. Nope, he said mythopoeic. So what does that mean?
So right in 1931, Tolkien distills some ideas that he has had about the relationship between myth and story in a poem, Mythopoeia. Right?
Oh, okay. So it's like a myth that's a story. Okay.
But
I reduced it too much. Sorry.
But a little bit too much. We have to re-pour the pot or the cup. It's not just a myth that is a story, but in the poem, right, there is what in kind of philosophy terms we might use an ontological relationship, which means that who we are in the stuff of our stuff, like the fabric of who we are is like sewn to the fabric of the world and the fabric of language and the fabric of stories. Okay,
that's all that Tolkien was about, so that makes sense. Did he make up that word, or did he? It came to be at his time?
Well, Mythopoeia, he is using words that are in
academia at the
so
time?
right. So poesis is Greek for simply making. It's also generally used. Poesis is used in ancient Greek for the making of. We get poetry from it, right? So it's not just a making, but it's a kind of poetic making. And so what that poem is about the making of stories that capture what ancient myths also capture, right?
Okay.
So this is the thing, why fandom is not always helpful. He's not a fantasy writer.
Right. Even though he's the father of modern fantasy.
Right? Yeah, he's
difficult.
Not a fantasy writer. He is attempting to craft for a world that has just gone through World War II, where he believes that the machines are the only victors, a mythology or a way of understanding self and world and language and stories to kind of live truly in it. Right?
Okay.
Otherwise, we're prisoners of that world.
Otherwise, we're prisoners of. Oh, without it, we are prisoners. Like we are.
Yes.
Oh, so he's not just talking about the POWs in, or the Jews or the whoever's captured by the Nazis in the prison cell. We are metaphorically prisoners without the escape of these myths.
Because the prison is larger, and this is where you were like, that sounds so Matrixy.
Yeah.
This enter Baudrillard.
Okay, yes. Okay, so can you explain who Baudrillard is and what he's about?
So and we'll use that because I'm sure that's one of the words in that title, right? Mythopoeic life worlds as a response to hyperreality.
Because the next question I have is about like what is a hyperreality?
Great. So hyperreality is not like
really real reality that's extra real.
Yeah, like that's the way can we use it in common language. We have hyperreal drawings and paintings, right?
Okay.
Chuck Jones, is
AKA
that his name?
A photograph, would we?
Right.
No,
well, that's a little different because there's something kind of photochemical happening there, right? We won't even get into that. That's like our photons actually being captured and like imprinted onto chemical paper, which is a
okay. Well,
trippy
oh my
concept.
goodness. Okay, so it is.
That's right.
Oh, I thought I was just making a funny aside. No. You're like,
No, there
no.
aren't
Sorry,
any
we had to
funny
get into
sides
it.
with me. That's the
So
thing. There are
there's no
funny
asides. Okay,
Um,
I'll remember
but
that for next time.
Hyperreality.
Okay. Okay.
So the Matrix, in the very first film, Neo goes to his shelf, and somebody comes to the door and asks for something, and so he goes to his shelf and he pulls a book off, and it's Simulacra and Simulation, Jean Baudrillard, and he opens it
Okay.
up and he takes out this thing and he gives it to this person, and they leave.
Okay, something's to do with the book. I'm gonna take a guess.
The idea of hyperreality, the Matrix is kind of it's a knockoff of the idea. It's it's rad. I mean, we'll deploy that term here, but
Okay.
the idea is that in a world that there is a historical uniqueness to the world that we live in.
Okay.
That is shaped by certain factors.
Okay.
Reproducible technology, right? So industrialism, but reproducible technology. Oh, I want that teddy bear. It's so special and I love it, right? Pull one off and there's 32,000 still on the shelf, right? Everyone gets to have the special thing. So reproducible technology, advertising, which is the kind of, we'll say, meta consumption of particular items. Man, I wish I had a Starbucks. You mean coffee? I've got some coffee. No, I wish I had a Starbucks.
Specifically. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so this is the hyperreality?
This is the hyperreality stuff.
Okay.
So this is what Baudrillard, trying to kind of get at what Baudrillard is talking about. And also a particular way of relating to the world. So this is the kind of connection that Tolkien and Baudrillard might have. They're both seeing at a similar point in history. Baudrillard's slightly later.
Okay, I was going to ask his dates.
They overlap. Baudrillard he's working at full speed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He's very much impacted by the '68 protests in Paris. He's a Marxist. After the '68 protest, famously, the students who had been protesting all spring for justice and for rights and for change in France all left for summer vacation. They're like, okay,
you gotta have your vacay.
And he's like, wait a second, what happened to the revolution, right?
So this is what spurs him on to be like, well, what did happen? Okay.
What did happen to the revolution? And that essentially protest against the systems and structures is absorbed into the systems and structures, because what it gets us to do is to want and desire and live in a realm that is in many ways disconnected from what we might say the real. Okay.
Oh, so hyperreality is a step away from the real. I don't know how many steps away.
It's a step away from, but here's the kicker, and we don't have to get too deep into this, but I think kind of conceptually we can start seeing parallels with Tolkien. It gets us away from the real because of our obsession with the real. And now in this sense, it's like the material real.
I was going to say the materialist.
Real, exactly. Yeah. Hard, right? And so when you want more and more of it, what it really does is kind of begins to separate us. The really kind of tragic and not so couth example, the best example to give, and we'll drop it and then leave it, but is pornography, right?
Okay.
The idea that like, oh, this is more real than anything. In actuality, you're getting further and further away from intimacy, from
I like sitting.
What a human body is, right?
Like there's a screen and there's you sitting in a chair. Yeah.
And that's right. So just kind of layers and layers of disconnected from ourselves, not just from each other, but from ourselves, our bodies, from the world, from anything. And so that's in a nutshell what Baudrillard is getting at. And
good for you for being able to do a nutshell, because I know that it's difficult.
I'm not sure if it was. It was kind of like
it was. No, I followed. So
Brazilian nutshell.
Okay. So from there, we now know what hyperreality is we know what you mean by it. So bringing it back to you looking at that in your thesis. So.
All right.
let's look at that in the context
Yeah,
of your
okay.
thesis with regards to Tolkien.
Yeah. So with regards to Tolkien, right? We might think that crafting mythopoeic life worlds is a theological response to hyperreality. Baudrillard doesn't think that there's kind of an escape to this,
Okay.
or he does, but
Is
they're
it more
very.
nihilistic, his view, then, or?
He does. Nietzsche is very important to him, and he does in his late work. I never had a chance to meet with him. I was going to go and study with him in Paris, but
Baudrillard?
yeah,
Like the
but
guy?
they were like, you know what? He's very sick right now, and he's not taking any students.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so
That's too bad.
there was a conference in Wales that he was going to be at, in which famously, so I went to the conference to try to like talk with him, and he wasn't able to attend the conference. But famously, he gave a keynote speech in absentia on disappearance.
Oh, wow. So he was going real meta with it.
And also, so we can see the kind of the nihilism and the leveling and the disappearance that essentially. So Baudrillard famously said, and he caught a lot of flack for this during the 1991 Gulf War, which famously, if people don't, some might remember and some might only kind of know about just the name from, Wiki or something like that. But it was the first war of the CNN age. Okay. So the Gulf War was really experienced by the American public in real time.
Right.
As bombs exploded, and only experienced through the CNN screen. Now, Baudrillard famously said the Gulf War never happened. Now, people are like, wait, what are you talking about? So this is kind of to the person who's like, does Tolkien have anything to say about Afghanistan, right?
Right.
What he meant was that the Gulf War, the reasons why it started, what was actually happening on the ground, the experience of war there, the effects on the people, the repercussions of the war in that space and in the souls of the American public, we have no idea what happened. As a matter of fact, we've been completely separated from it, because the only Gulf War that we understand to have happened was the one through the media.
Through the lens. Okay.
Through the lens, essentially. That's a good, yeah.
I just like to reduce things, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
So now, so he doesn't think that there's an escape from that.
Okay, right? He doesn't. So he's more like, there's nothing you can do. This is just.
He doesn't think that there's an escape from it. That we're caught in it. That we're caught in the consumer circle. We're caught in the consumption. We're caught in all of this. Now, enter Tolkien fandom, right?
Right. Enter Tolkien fandom. Yes.
The problems of which in many ways take Tolkien's legendarium and attempts to pull it into
the hyperreality.
Through the love and devotion, through wanting to kind of have, the One Ring script on your, on the back of your neck tattooed, or the Frodo tattoo on your calf or something like that.
Wait. I just realized I forgot
now, please forgive me if there's any one of those tattoos on you.
I need to show you I was mentioning to you the other day about my art.
Yes.
So this is my.
Oh, that's and that's from high school, right?
Yeah.
That's incredible likeness, though.
This is my Frodo.
That's him looking into the bowl of Galadriel, right?
I don't know. I got the picture from Google.
Now,
it's just a picture. It's not from. I think it might just be a test shot. It's black and white. It's hard to tell. There's no background. It might be a studio shot. Anyway.
This is important because this is different, right? Like,
but mine's a one of a kind. But if I started making prints, because I've actually shared this on Twitter, and someone said, "Do you make prints?" And I was like, "I don't know how to do that." So anyway, sorry, that was an aside. I just had to show my intense fangirl.
No, this is fantastic. And also, let's make sure, because we need to keep this honest, because I mean, this is very offensive, right? Because we love Tolkien and we want to, talk more about and revel in, but it's not the kind of reveling that he would want.
Okay, but wait. Is there not okay? I need to be.
The painting's good.
So is my painting? Is it like? Because there are some, no, it's not just my painting. There are some beautiful Tolkien artistic renderings of different, like, individuals and spaces and air, and he did art himself of his worlds as well.
Yes.
So are there right ways to represent the legendarium without
I'm gonna catch flack for this, and let me just say this in a hypothetical way. I think
is my painting?
I
need to just cast it into Mount Doom? Like, what do I need to do?
No, it's great.
Sorry, I threw you off.
No, it's absolutely wonderful.
With my intense.
No, but there's also like
worry.
contact to kind of the pop art kind of tradition, right? So this is kind of modern art in the pop art tradition that's bringing in something from the culture itself. And right, there's something. What Tolkien would want, though, and what is for people to make paintings informed by the language and cultures of Middle Earth. What would that look like? Or to make clothing, or to make books and paper, or to right. So there's a kind of a subtle difference here, and we see that this is one of the great successes of Jackson's films is the art direction, right? The clothing.
He takes it. He very much takes the direction from Tolkien's armor, words. Yeah.
The swords. I mean, an incredible, beautiful sense of craft, and even though they're rendered as fictions, the architecture as well, right? So these are wonderful things. Now, the reason why this is important to kind of point out to is that there's something more going on that Tolkien demands of us.
Okay.
And what that thing is, it goes back to this kind of scary philosophical term, ontological, right? Remember, we're sewn to the way we speak, the way we, the world, each other, to the fabric of reality. He would want us to kind of have a change of, what we might say, a change of disposition in reading these stories. Okay. Where we begin to have a sense of humility, a sense of wonder, a sense of not environmentalism, but to be able, when the wind blows through the trees, to have a sense of gratitude, of the mysteries of that sound, and to even write poetry that may capture the rich depths of this. Now, some people might say, oh, well, that sounds like Ode to a Nightingale, right? John Keats, Romanticism. This is what the Romantics were up to. And many people have tried to kind of connect Tolkien to the Romantic poets, right?
I can see that, yeah.
And Ode to the Nightingale, absolutely beautiful. And the Song of a Nightingale, you kind of move into the mysteries of the forest and the elf-like nature of this thing, and the kind of you return, all on the kind of the notes of the song of this kind of beautiful creature, right? There's more to it than just bird of a particular genus and species and a particular rhythmic sound that it makes, right? Tolkien, and so this is why his work has everything actually to say about all the things in which we encounter in this modern world, especially in a world run by the machines. I'm going to cut that off there, so maybe we kind of like bring it back to
I do okay, because I have some thoughts regarding just some analogies to see if this actually tracks with what you're saying. So with regards to the hyperreality thing, with regards to fandoms and how Tolkien's fandom itself is participating in this sort of hyperreality. So
people are gonna be so upset at me. It's great though, but it's important to talk about.
Well, I am part of I am literally of the Jackson generation. Like I have mentioned to you the other day how I read The Hobbit in grade 7. I had seen the Rankin Bass, like, weird looking cartoon.
It's very hippie. I love it.
Yeah. Like, it is. So that was, it didn't create the fandom in me, but I thought it was cool at the time. We wrote letters to other classmates in runes, and you had to decode
You want to say decode it.
That's it. Yeah, decode it. Yeah. So and I still have the letter somewhere. Actually, I found it the other day. I was like, oh, this is nice. So that was, but there's something special. I like that because I'm like, this was before I saw Lord of the Rings.
Right.
This was before I was a fan.
Right.
This is me untouched, unsullied by I didn't think those words, but I had the feeling.
Yeah.
I had the feeling of like, oh, this is kind of special because it's to do with Tolkien before I knew.
Yeah.
But again, it's not bad to become a fan, but there's something, whatever. So there's a something.
Well, what does that word mean, right? We should ask ourselves after you tell us
fanatic,
this, right?
right?
It in some ways it's short for fanatic, but it really has kind of a consumer aspect to it, right?
Okay, yes, the consumer. Okay. So I'm wondering if this is something I've noticed, and you can tell me if you think this is part of that hyperreality getting more and more realized, I suppose.
Yeah.
I've noticed that shops, like fan shops, like fan items, like I went to the Jane Austen Museum in Bath in 2011.
That sounds fantastic.
Yes, it was wonderful. Yeah. I remember there was, like, I have a Mr. Darcy, Colin Firth, a bookmark. Because that was the best they had. Like, they didn't have they had the books. They had a couple other stationary type things. I think you could maybe buy a fan if you wanted. But then that's it. And now, I follow them on Instagram now. I found them recently. And they have nightgowns and bonnets and jewelry, Regency jewelry. Like, they have, I don't think they actually have Regency dresses yet. But they have all of the things. And then also with the, I don't remember if they had it. I know there's like I know there's the OneRing.net, which has been around for a long time. But I know there was an official Lord of the Rings Weta Workshop website.
Yeah.
And they had the items. You could buy them and possess them, my precious, right? I should have brought it down. I have a One Ring. Like, I have it with the chain. Like, I happen to have a chain that looked like the chain. So I still have kept it, and I brought it out and showed my kids in The Hobbit. I was like, oh, guys, look at this. And they're like, oh, mommy. Actually, no. One of my kids went into my room and found it. And I was like, oh, mommy, this sort of looks like the ring that Bilbo found. This looks like Bilbo's ring. And I was like, huh, does it? I did not tell them. I did not tell them to go look for it. And I did not tell them what it was. So I just thought it was pretty awesome that they just knew. Anyways, but I have a plan. This might be because of okay, there's a question in here. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great.
But
there's rich stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a plan. So I read The Discarded Image by C.S. Lewis. I've talked to Richard Rohlin about it. Okay. I've talked about the sort of different, our modern context versus the medieval way that people view the world, which is the way that Tolkien probably was going for. Like, maybe we could view it this way through Lord of the Rings, So anyways, I didn't think, because of my new ways of being and my new interests, I'm gonna get rid of that One Ring that I've had for ages. It's not because of that. I just thought that I've held on to it for so long, and it's nice to hold on to things to remember. But I heard my online pastor, I call him Paul Vanderclay. He said something about him and his kids got a risk, Lord of the Rings risk, and it came with a One Ring, and they went and like flushed it down the toilet right away. So I actually, when I started reading, it didn't dawn on me to do this, but I remembered that story as I was reading The Hobbit, and my kids came and saw and found Bilbo's ring. I was like, I think when we finish The Return of the King, I think I want to take them out. There's no volcano mouths in Calgary, Alberta, but I was thinking of taking them out to like in the middle of a lake and having and us like dropping it in. Yeah. Kind of like, I guess more in like the Isildur mist, losing it in the lake, right, in the river. But I thought it'd be cool to let it go. Part of me wonders, as we're talking, maybe there was a depth of like this consumery, like, but it's literally precious, my precious. It's the representation. Yep. And keeping it feels like I'm participating in the machine. So is that a thing? Like, is the fan stores becoming more populated with more and more replicas of things from movies that we want to possess? And then my like wanting to not participate anymore and get rid of it. So what do you think of that?
Yes.
That's it.
I think that is, and just to elaborate a little bit more, I think that's spot on. I think I'll use a Tolkien example to elaborate. In The Hobbit is a story about going to free treasure from a dragon.
Yep.
Okay.
Quite
But at the beginning of the story, there is mention of were-dragons
Okay.
that live out in the east. This idea of were-dragons. And suddenly we begin to realize that
Where like werewolf, like isn't where the
like Anglo-Saxon,
wasn't it where man, like where man and woman and where man, and now it's just man, it's shortened.
and so when you say werewolf, you're basically saying
Man wolf.
a man wolf, right?
Right.
And so
So man dragon, what?
so suddenly we realize that, and I don't think this is a Reno Lauro thing, because I don't think I've heard this anywhere. So
Okay.
and it's being captured, so it's
It
good.
sounds
And
like you have your own lore. Anyways, go on.
But we suddenly meet Beorn, who
Right,
shape
who's
shifts into a bear.
Yeah.
Okay. And then suddenly we realize that there's something called being caught in the kind of a dragon trance, right? And suddenly we realize, wait a second, this story is really about people that look like human beings, but are really dragons, and have the heart and hoarding nature and the jealousy of a dragon.
Okay.
My boy asked me, are there such thing as werewolves? And I'm like, yes, there are, but no one has ever lived to see when they transform. But there are people out there who are in the skin of human beings, but are really wolves inside.
Well, literally, The Wolf of Wall Street is a movie.
Well, literally, it's a movie, right?
No, I know, but that's art imitating life, isn't it? Of what you're describing.
The idea that this person is a wolf, right? That's the celebration of this. But it takes a different view when we get kind of really intense and we think of like a Ted Bundy or something, who was a werewolf.
Yeah.
And in that moment of terror, right? God forbid, right? Was not human and transformed into some beast, right? So, and with the were-dragon, we have that too, that we can have the heart of and the transform into the greed of a dragon itself. So the ring itself, right? While there's lots of things that we can kind of bring into it from, the ring of Gyges from Plato's Republic, or bring in
like Sigurd's ring.
We can bring in the Sigurd's ring as well, right? Okay. These are kind of ring stories, but at the heart of it is what the ring does, right? And Sauron, right? What the ring does and represents, and the wanting of it. It's not the wanting of the ring, but the wanting and what we do for the wanting, and the kind of the misaligned or out of tune desiring that the wanting kind of exaggerates, right, is the thing. And so when you're saying, I want to hold on to it because I want a piece of that thing, it's like, exactly. You don't want the story, right? Or you don't want the world. We just want we want to own and possess.
Right.
For my own kind of thinking and doing and for pleasuring, right? And so that's in many ways missing the point in what Baudrillard is talking about with hyperreality. Baudrillard doesn't point this out. Umberto Eco does, another semiotician, but he talks about Coca-Cola and the idea that it's the real thing.
Right.
Or we might think of Pepsi back in the day during the 60s, the way that Pepsi Cola captured the protest generation, the Pepsi generation. Right?
Oh.
If you're of this generation, you get it. You're the Pepsi generation.
Okay, see, I didn't know that that's what Pepsi did. So part of me thinks that Coke kind of won in capturing because Coca-Cola's whole thing has stayed a little bit.
Like who drinks Pepsi anymore, right?
well, I mean, I remember Pepsi tried really hard in the late 90s, early 2000s. I remember they co-opted Britney Spears to do Pepsi. Right. I know, but sorry, going back to Coke, it's the real thing, but it's also the Christmas thing. Like
Yes,
they
let's
made
bring in
themselves.
Mad Men.
I
It's
have warm,
advertising.
soft, cozy feelings when I see a Coke, like the commercial with the Christmas train, and like the Coke with the polar bears, and
Or
the
the
Coke Santa.
original and the Coke commercial from the 1970s, which Mad Men famously ends,
Yeah,
kind of saying that
yeah, yeah,
Don
yeah.
Draper
Yeah.
developed
I want to
this,
give the world a Coke. Yeah,
right? That was capturing
it's a
the mood.
feeling.
It's it's a feeling.
It's
Exactly.
selling feelings. Okay, so that gets
Yeah,
into very is that part of the hyperreality thing, selling
absolutely.
feelings
And buying feelings.
and buying, so selling and buying, so it's trading. And
Yes.
the way you're describing it makes it so clear how we are actually participating in the world of an idea, concept, feeling, but in a commodity consumer
Yes.
space. Like, I want
Yes.
content. I want to generate more content for my audience to consume.
Yeah, and we see this with cinema. I mean, we want to be careful, right? Because when we peddle in, so just one caveat, one warning for us as we
Okay.
talk about this. It's easy to kind of slip into Marxian language
I
of
was just doing that with the
commodity
consuming thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
exchange, like, no, but it's a real thing to kind of think about because it's a real event that's happening. But what we don't want to do, and I think where Baudrillard goes off, kind of leads us astray, is that is a world itself that is only a kind of a material exchange world, a world of material
Right.
exchange, and peddling only in material exchange,
Right,
so
right,
that
right.
even work and what it means to be a human being, which is defined just by work and power, right? Power relationships,
Yeah.
it
This
that
way lies
itself
madness.
trick and kind
Yeah.
of leads us down the dead end. But you're absolutely right, especially now, human beings, 21st century West, we are citizens of the technocracy.
Mm-hmm.
It is, for all intents and purposes, almost inescapable, though we do see kind of subcultures and movements that kind of attempt to move away from that. And I'm very sympathetic to all of it, right? Because, and even I've been wanting to say this for a long time, so I'm going to articulate it here just for the shock value. But
Yeah.
even sympathetic to even sympathetic to the flat earthers, God bless them. Insofar
Well,
as that, no, listen. And in no way, I mean, like there's kind of undeniable and undeniable, but um, like to push back and say, oh, you know what? You think that you know everything about science. There was a time in which we had a different relationship to Earth and to science and to stories. And like I get that. Like, I mean, so with the flat earthers though, we have to say that these kind of subcultures, they're attempting to push back against this mechanism.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
many of them, like flat earthers, right, are hopelessly and undeniably misguided. And what Tolkien wanted to do was to kind of create a framework to say, this is what pushing back against this looks like.
Okay, so bring it back,
Yes.
because that was my next question, was going to be,
I
okay,
saw your eyes
so,
there. You got worried. You're like,
oh, no, no,
uh-oh,
no, no.
where's the interview going?
No, no, I wasn't. I was, no, actually, what I was thinking was, well, we're all flat earthers in practice. But
Oh,
anyway,
oh
and
no. Okay, here
I'm
we go. Keep
stealing that
unleashed.
from Jonathan Peugeot, because he
Yeah,
has a piece. He has a piece
yes,
on that.
that's right.
But no, but that is my next question, and you brought it back, so thank you. So about, so now we've really fleshed out or fleshed out. I don't even know which it is, fleshed
I,
out or fleshed out.
fleshed. I
Okay,
think fleshed.
fleshed out. So we've fleshed out
We flush
what
down,
hyper
flush out.
real
Yeah.
what hyper reality is. So this is where we're coming from, and
Yes.
then you're saying in your dissertation that this is what a response is to this. Like
Yes.
Tolkien's world is the
Yes.
response to this. And I don't
Yes.
know if this is true. The appropriate response to this, or this is what Tolkien was doing himself, or are we using him in that way?
That's
Like,
a
which is it?
fantastic question. Yes is the
Thank you.
answer.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I am of the opinion, and so this is what I'm going to qualify my appropriate fandom. I am of
Okay.
the opinion that
I'm the right one. Yeah.
this is the correct response to the technocracy.
Okay.
Let's say this, right? Like Tolkien, he's of a generation of thinkers and philosophers who are seeing this.
Yes.
They
Okay.
get what's happening, right? Um, there's some pushback in philosophy that's occurring at the same time. In literature, it's occurring at the same. It's like people are seeing this. I think with Tolkien, what we see is something kind of unique and different. What he says is that the only appropriate way to respond to this, one is theologically oriented and grounded and in the tradition, but it doesn't pretend or peddle theology, right? This is why
Okay.
he's very specific in saying, oh, there's not theology, there's not religion in this or kind of religious structures in this, right? The only appropriate response is to retrieve and to excavate and to bring back into fashion a way of it living and relating and existing to language, to the world, to each other, that is literally a kind of counter universe within this to kind of open up. But he does it in such a way where, like, he wasn't a weirdo, right? He didn't go and like live in a cabin and have long nails and grew his hair. Like, he was an Oxford Don. He was an Oxford man all his life. But his relationship to that world in that city was inextricably different from other people's relationship. And we sense that, like, we get it. We want to see the world in the way that he saw it. And hopefully, if there's enough people, shires form, ways of making and exchanging form, things that we appreciate form, something as simple as like just, that's why like his appreciation of tobacco, right? His relationship to ale and to wine and to
I'm thinking like a really good, nice cup of coffee in the morning in the Americanized version. Well, I am Canadian, but the North
and there's
American
those things, but all these simple pleasures, right? That are experienced as not the caffeine delivery device, right? Which you could take a pill for, right?
No, it's the ritual. No, it is the ritual. It's the
Yes.
ritual.
Well, it's part
Yes.
of it. It's part of what kind of helps make it about the thing itself, right? Ritual does that.
Right. But the ritual of okay, my husband is just getting into pipes,
Oh, nice.
like vintage
Yeah.
pipes. He hasn't gotten into it quite yet. He has it, and it
Right.
looks so cool. And it just is it. I imagine there's a sort of process to getting the tobacco
right.
and filling it up
Yeah.
and like. Are you a pipe man? Are you into?
I used to be. So I'm of the appropriate age where I've lived a couple of lives, and I had a good like pipe run, especially while I was writing my dissertation, and was away for that for a little while. But upon kind of meeting Richard and talking more and stuff, like have been drawn back into
The
the
world of the pipe.
lovely treasures of that. But whiskey, the different smells and tastes of whiskey,
Right,
the different smells
notes, as they say,
and notes of coffee, right?
Right.
Grinding your own
Right.
coffee and feeling those beans crush under the weight of your arm extended.
I use an electric grinder.
Right, exactly.
But I feel like I've removed myself. Yeah, so the idea of no, but like the going through the motions of like, but not in an absent way, going through the motions specifically. Like the idea of looking at things, going through ritual, and I even have been doing this with my plants. I told you that the other day about how I'm looking at the plants in a way that Treebeard would look at the trees. I am like, this is a living thing, and I'm watering the living thing, and I try to, and I forget sometimes, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I forgot to water you yesterday. And also a friend of mine, I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and she said, yes, oh, that reminds me, I keep forgetting to introduce my new plant to the other plants. So it's not just me. She has her own thing there. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do that too. I didn't think about introducing the new plant to
Yeah.
the other existing plants. But again, I know we can get too far with treating them as people, but it's just looking at it as they're adamant objects. They're not inanimate.
Yes.
They have souls.
Yeah, and also to add to this, lest we kind of go down too far one way and not kind of bring in the whole fabric, right? This is one of the beautiful things about the discarded image, right? That Lewis points out is this kind of fabric of the medieval world and how various it was, but how it was able to kind of hold all of these different ideas and traditions together, right? Mm-hmm. The same way in thinking about Tolkien's kind of mythopoeic life. That yes to that, but also what is the name of this plant? Not like its personal name, but what name does this plant, has it been called? Remember that
he lists all the names, right? Like, yeah,
right. That
he always gives 10
asks
names.
Sam if he knows of a certain plant, and Sam, being a gardener, only knew its kind of common, vulgar name, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But not its ancient use.
Yeah.
So even there, just in that small picture, we see the forgetting of a common gardener of the ancient and special uses of a particular plant.
Right.
So knowing its names and the way that it's been called, and what are these words? What words were used to call this plant a particular name? Mm-hmm. And how was it used? And investigating that, importing those relationships to the plant back here. What prayers are said when one comes before this plant, or you pick a certain flower? Does the tradition have anything like that? And why would they say those things, right?
That's something that has come into my mind, in the sense that all my little plants are on a little ottoman by the window, and it kind of looks like a bit of an altar.
Right, an altar to plantness, and indeed we see that. Right, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with environmental concerns per se. Obviously, it's a good thing to have healthy water
within a certain hierarchy. Yeah.
But the environmental movement can, in many ways, become, and has become, like what you were worried about, the kind of plants being stuck there. A religion in and of itself, completely devoid of all of these other aspects.
Okay, so that's the fandom. That's Tolkien's fandom.
It's kind of like a fandom.
It's become its own separate, apart from.
And it's living in a realm beyond what Baudrillard said, borrowing an analogy from Borges, the great Argentinian writer. He said that the map of the landscape ceases to exist, and all we're left with is the map itself. Environmentalism is just the map of a landscape and the richness and the mysteries of it that has been forgotten. Fandom is just the map of the richness and depths and the artistry of the way that a particular thing can move a person, right? Because it could be fandom.
Aren't bad, right? Yeah, they're not bad in and of themselves. It's what you do.
And they're forgetting, and what's forgotten, right?
Okay. So Tolkien, you said that the way that he lived his life, he didn't go and become a hermit apart from civilization, thinking, oh, look how badly we've come to depend on technology and incorporate technology into our lives the way that we shouldn't. And that's just one example of what he maybe wouldn't have approved of the modernization of the world. But he didn't go away. He stayed, and he continued to participate, but he participated on his own terms. I mean, I know some ways. That sounds a little bit too like modern feminism. but he participated in a way that he thought was more true. Is that right?
Yeah.
More authentic?
Well, authentic is a great word. And it's an authentic, but it's not just in the way that he saw it, right? This is not licensed to be like, well, I'm going to live my authentic life.
No, but he thought this could be for all, that we all could with
Absolutely,
his legendarium, with the fabric, right?
Because where he moved, he was connected to a larger tradition of language and of encountering the world. It's summed up very well in just kind of words like humility, wonder, longing, right? When these words capture a way of kind of moving through the world that extends us into the deep things of world, of time, of space.
Okay.
but yes, he thinks that this is for all of us and in the way that we should do it on a daily basis. But what matters is the how, and the authentic life is being connected to, and he's right about this, through language, the richness of the world itself. So we hear kind of like ideas of re-enchanting the world, right? And that's fantastic. It can kind of lose its meaningness if we take it too far. But what that means is that when we're in a forest, they're more than just forests. There are an appreciation of trees and the names of trees and the songs sung about that particular forest and that particular landscape, right? I think the emphasis here is, what do we spend our time dwelling on and thinking of? When we think of kind of material things like the game with the ring, rather than reading more about the way that the ancients would relate to war and to each other, right? Reading more poetry, reading more language, investing in the landscape that one is in that space, right? There's something more true to the Lord of the Rings in knowing the names of the rivers in your town and the old names that hills were called than playing Lord of the Rings Risk, right? Right? Or making your own game that incorporates those names into the landscape, right? Right? There's something, because we're being transformed by our investigation of it and being brought closer to the land, whereas the game itself, we think it's going to help us capture everything that we loved about Lord of the Rings, for example, but it's actually pulling us away from all those things.
Okay, but I like games. I think that they're good for family dynamics.
Yes. So, and I play games and I play board games.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And this is not.
I'm pretty sure you're in Richard's Dungeons
who
and
told
Dragons
you
group.
this?
You did on the last podcast. I heard you on, sir.
And no, there is. That's another beast itself. Now, games are good. Play is good. Play is fun. But what I'm saying is,
we're getting captured too much by the thingness.
Yes.
The precious.
Yes. So my boy John Cassian, he probably knows more about the legendarium than I do.
Okay.
How
old is he?
He's 8. But he loves what's it called? Is it the Lore of the Ring? It's a YouTube.
There's Nerd of the Ring.
It's Nerd of the Ring. That's
I love that one. I actually watched that a lot.
Oh my goodness. And he knows, so he's like, no, Dad, Gil-galad is like such and such, and no, like Thorne's grandfather was right. And it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah. The thing I love about that though is that it is like sitting and hearing the old stories being told, right?
Right.
That there's not a kind of a consuming of a thing itself, but you're getting deeper and deeper into a world. And so game like that moves us into worlds, that allows us to explore and to create music and characters and narratives. Right.
Again, but you can take it too far, like you were saying with the fandom. Like it can be taken too far in the sense of where you lose it. You lose the point.
Yeah. And also when you kind of lose track of what's good and true and beautiful, like, right. I think back in the day, wasn't there like kind of vampire role playing where like people would like go out into the streets? I think this was back in the day when like interview at Anne Rice's, the height of Anne Rice.
Okay. Is this during the Satanic Panic or like, I mean, I know that's when like Dungeons and Dragons got its really bad name.
No, but this is like people would do like this was like really early LARPing. It was like vampire LARPing.
Okay.
Out in the streets.
And they would bite people?
I don't know. I've never participated in it. But what I do know is that would be an example of, let's just say that it never happened and I just made up that story.
Okay.
But if that were the case, it would be like going too far. And also we would lose sight of. It would be like wanting to get, putting the ring on your finger. It's like, why would you want to do that? All the best people in the Lord of the Rings didn't want to do that. As a matter of fact, they wanted to throw it into the...
That's the thing. But that's the thing. That's why I feel like I've matured as a person. That I'm happy to cast it aside into the depths. Right. Yeah.
And admittedly, like we bought my little boy the ring with the thing, right?
You're like, but just to be fully
But we
transparent.
also talk about like the importance of like redirecting attentions, right?
Right.
This is the thing. It's cool. I know why you love it. It's awesome. I know. Just
right, but it represents it's, and I think the idea, and again, I don't want to just flush it down the toilet like the story that I heard about
that
what
would
they
be
did.
irresponsible
I
too,
want
because
to
somebody
do.
might find it.
Well, okay, but no, I want to do. I want to cast it aside, cast it away in a ritualistic
No, I love that
way, in a participatory way, the way that they. If we lived in Hawaii, and or in Washington near Mount St. Helen, like I would be all for going up to the mouth of the volcano and casting it in, but I don't. I mean, I do live near mountains, so we could go up to the mountains, but I don't know. It just feels a little bit more like bloop. I don't know.
I love that idea.
Whatever.
Hey, but let me ask you a question. Can we bring religion and theology into this?
Oh, okay. I thought you were like, can we wrap this up, please?
No.
No, I know we have a little bit more time here. So you do have the words like you have theology in there. So yes, please bring it in how you.
Well, I mean, we have language for this, right? I mean, and it doesn't even have to be. I mean, we also have philosophical language, and the church fathers saw Plato and Plotinus. Plotinus came after him and was kind of mixing in a little bit of Aristotle into his own writings. But the language of the desires of our needs, our kind of the desires of the external world, they misalign our souls. That there's an education and a practice and an asceticism, I'll use that loosely in quotes, that's required to kind of shape our souls in order to participate more fully in a more true reality.
Okay, so go into that, please.
I mean, it's the reason, I mean, we're in the season of Lent, speaking about this, right? In the Western Church and in the Eastern Orthodox Church, we're in the season of Lent. Lent is not about keeping the soul. Alexander Schmemann has a great book, Great Lent. He's an Eastern Orthodox theologian from the 20th century. And he's like, look, Lent is not about denying the body.
Because that's it's like denying oneself is what a lay person would think of.
Right?
Yeah.
It's about training us for what the really real life looks like. It's about.
Okay, well, what does that mean, though, Reno?
I know.
Like, what does that mean?
It's about attuning our attentions, reshifting our attentions to the true things of human existence that aren't merely the material things of this world.
Okay.
Right? And they include. Right. And let's bring Plato back into this, lest we think like, oh, this is just Christian. It's like, no, this is like the Western tradition. Plato would call the tyrant somebody who is gluttonous. Gluttony is related to tyranny. Right. And so because all of these things have to do with more than simply the things that we want and need and feel, but we need to train ourselves in order to kind of draw closer to the true and the really real things of the world, of reality. And Tolkien is doing this in his own way. He's saying that it's not in his own way. He's tapping into a tradition. He's saying mythology is a part of human existence because it does precisely that, right? And that's the way that it funched. Right, but as soon
it adjusts our view.
Here's the truth, though. As soon as we say mythology or that's mythological, the mythology no longer functions for us because now
we think not real. We think not real. We're distanced.
Critically. Oh, that's just to explain the reason why the sun rises and the sun sets, right? This is the kind of 19th century philology stuff. It's like, no, if that's the case, then what we need to do is that we need to kind of we need to do a mythology that we kind of extract from the past and kind of begin to shape our world around. So that we don't think of it as mythology. We think of it as this is what it means to be a human being in the proper way in an age of machines.
Right. Okay. Yes, because I'm thinking about time and time again the patterns that come up in the legendarium.
Yes.
The big bad, whether that be Melkor Morgoth or Sauron Anatar. that right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you'll need to know that for the upcoming Amazon Lord of the Rings show, everyone.
Precisely.
I assume. I'm presuming, but anyway. And then Sauron, like in the as we see him in the Third Age. So they always are about consuming and mechanization, but it weakens them in a way because it draws them away from who they are. Because they started off as good members of the Einar part, like of the music of Iluvatar in the beginning, and so they were good. But then the more that they, I don't want to say consume, but the more mechanized, mixed with consumption, mixed with that wanting, the greed, the more tyrannical, because it kind of sparked this when you said about the tyrant.
Yeah.
The more they're removed from who they are or could have been or were, and the less authentic selves, if you want to say in modern way, the more hollow and less they become less.
The more wraith-like they become.
Yes. Oh, one could say.
Right.
One could even say, yeah.
And just along those lines, I mean, we should point out, I mean, the Silmarillion is a story. It is the history of us told in terms of making. It's all about making. The music of the Ainur is about making. The Silmarils is about making. The rings is about making, right? Making things and crafts. Magic itself is a technology that makes. The question is, what does it look like from time immemorial, from the beginning of the ages? What does it mean to make correctly, to use correctly, to live correctly? Right? It's glorious.
And that's where you've got to go read the source material, folks.
It's glorious. Yeah. So
I like that. I like that as a spot to end, because it isn't actually answerable, because it's not through answering, it's through living. Right? Yeah. It's living. You don't, I mean, we could come up with some sort of answer. That's what this entire talk has been, is answering the question you just said.
Yeah.
But it's really in how do we participate? How do we frame things? How do we look at others and things and our world? How do we relate to them? Yeah. And then through and in the reading and discussion in the proper fan level,
right,
we can turn our faces like towards Valinor.
Yeah, I dig that.
Light.
I dig that.
Right. So but it is in the participation. It is in a living it out, because you can say it as much as you want, but it doesn't mean anything unless you live it. At least that's from my own perspective.
All things and all ages and all people are east of Valinor.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a good place to end. I think that we'll cut it there. Thank you so much for coming on my
great time.
Channel.
Thank you for having me.
This was fantastic. Like, it was really in the fullest sense of that word. And I will ask you to come back when the Amazon
Let's
series
do it.
comes
I love
out.
it.
We're gonna have a lot to wade through. So. It's mine, my own, my precious.